Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Ukraine marks 4 years since the start of Russia's invasion. Zelensky says Putin has not won this war, whilst Putin accuses Ukraine of sabotaging the peace process. Trump's new global tariffs come into effect at a lower rate of 10% ahead of the president's State of the Union address. Soldiers are deployed across Mexico to curb violence following the killing of the country's most wanted drug lord, El Mencho. And the family of missing 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie are offering a $1 million reward for information leading to her return. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has marked the 4-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion alongside his coalition of the willing allies. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron appeared on the video conference as they continued to pledge support and peacekeeping efforts. Earlier, Zelensky addressed his countrymen and told them Putin had not achieved his goal. Take a listen.
Today marks exactly 4 years since Putin started his 3-day push to take Kyiv. And that, in fact, says a great deal about our resistance, about how Ukraine has fought all this time. Behind those words stand millions of our people. Behind those words stand immense courage, incredible hard work, endurance, and the long path Ukraine has been pursuing since February 24. Putin has not achieved his goals. He has not broke Ukrainians. He has not won this war. We have preserved Ukraine, and we will do everything to secure peace and justice.
Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin has responded, accusing Ukraine of sabotaging the peace process, which their recent attacks against Russian pipelines. Take a listen.
We are talking about a possible bombing of our gas system under the Black Sea, namely the so-called Turk Stream and Blue Stream. They cannot calm down. They are desperate to destroy this peaceful diplomatic process. They are trying to provoke an incident to derail everything that, I'll say carefully, has been achieved on this negotiation track.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined in the studio by columnist and correspondent Gemma White and Michael Jabri-Pickett, Managing Director of This Is Dubai. Gemma, let's go to you first, because we've just heard from Zelensky and, of course, we heard from President Putin on this 4-year anniversary. So in many ways, the war is now entering the 5th year. Take us back to the very, very beginning. Why did Russia invade Ukraine?
It's kind of almost feels like it's been lost in the midst of time now. So the invasion pulls together like quite a few threads. It's a mix of strategic, political, historical and ideological factors. But at its heart is Russia's desire to reassert their influence over Ukraine and Ukraine's gradual drift westwards, looking for allyship in Europe. So primarily, this was about NATO expansion. Ukraine has not been backward in their desire to join NATO, and Russia has always said that would bring the Western military on their doorstep, and they were dead set against it. Now, NATO has said that they're defensive, they're not an offensive organisation, and Ukraine has the right to choose if they join or not. But that was always a major factor, is Ukraine's desire to be a part of NATO. Now, since the 2014 Maidan uprising, and that ousted a pro-Russian president in Ukraine, Kyiv has always looked for closer ties with Europe, and we have seen Starmer and Macron step up relentlessly to show their support, and that appears to be unwavering. So if Russia was hoping that Ukraine would stop looking to the West, that's just not going to happen. That's not going to be achieved at all.
Because even Zelensky says he wants them to fast-track them becoming part of the European Union,
yes,
which now seems to be more probable, because we know that one of Russia's red lines still is Ukraine joining NATO. So it seems to be like they've given that aside to join the European Union.
Yeah, this quest is not going to go anywhere. I think, irrespective of whatever peace process Putin is talking about there, he seems to have invented that completely in his mind. This question of Ukraine wanting to side with Europe, wanting to join the EU, is never going to go away. Now, also, we have this ongoing conflict over Crimea and Donbass regions, which Russia sees as rightfully theirs. And we have Putin's historical claims. You know, he still sees Ukrainian people as Russians. So that's not going to go away either. You've got this immovable object and this irresistible force. And that's why we haven't achieved anything, you know, in the peace process over 4 years, because yeah, we're still here 4 years later.
Yes, and we still seem to be sometimes getting somewhere on the negotiating front, and then there's big disagreements on territory and security guarantees, and these seem to be those main sticking points, which are, of course, the major ones. But what I also found when I was looking today and thinking back to 4 years ago, of course, I was a journalist when this happened, and I remember so many people at the time and analysts saying that Russia will take Ukraine in days, weeks, but days was the estimate. And now we look 4 years on, the resilience the Ukrainians have actually shown has been pretty phenomenal, and no one would have ever expected us to still be having this discussion 4 years on.
We were just talking that Ukrainians don't even have a navy, and yet they're doing a fine job of defending their coast against you know, the very vaulted Russian navy. And what they have done is they've taken warfare to that next step, which is inevitable. It becomes a little bit more dangerous or a little bit more tactical. And for the Ukrainians, what they have done is they figured out, with these drones that are not that expensive, we can be incredibly efficient at making sure that we strike deep in the heart of Russia, as they have done, or we can attack their navy, as they have done. We can do damage to their infrastructure as well. And that, I think, has helped arms dealers around the world recognize that, oh, we don't necessarily have to go big and mighty and massively expensive. We can just make sure that we outfit a drone. And this is one of the areas that the Ukrainians have done very well. I can remember watching a late night talk show, and it was the 3-week mark. And we were all amazed that Ukrainians had still not surrendered. Russians had not sort of rolled over them. And it just continues. And now we're, I think, truly in a stalemate. The Ukrainians are doing very good, making headway in the battlefield. Either they're reclaiming more, or they're certainly not letting Russia reclaim more. And it's at a true stalemate. And you have a leader on the Ukrainian side who is not willing to give up territory. You have the Russians and President Vladimir Putin, who absolutely want that, and they're just at loggerheads. And you have Donald Trump, who seems distracted by so many other issues, so many other big, if it be tariffs, or tonight the State of the Union, or what's going on in Gaza, what's happening in Iran. So you don't have that one unifying force who's bringing everybody together on a consistent basis to try to hammer home what are the issues that we can sort out.
And we talk about Donald Trump, and he's key to all of this, because he's the key that can unlock this deal by putting more pressure on Russia, sanctions-wise, crippling the economy, making Putin feel the squeeze. And also, we can't forget that Donald Trump got Putin back to the negotiating table, because Biden never did that. Europe haven't had conversations with Vladimir Putin, and that's been a big criticism when it comes to Russia. Russia were never invited to these talks. So in some ways, at least Donald Trump has actually got them to the table and got them talking, because we didn't see that before.
So I would say that he's got them talking. I don't know that they're negotiating anything. I think they're, by all accounts, they're still asking for everything that they've asked for from the beginning. So I don't know if
Ukraine is also still asking for weapons, so everything they've been asking for from the beginning, and the US and the EU have to pay for those weapons.
Absolutely, but the Ukrainians were the ones that were violated. You know, the Russian side, they're the aggressors, despite what Donald Trump might have said. And Donald Trump also promised during the campaign trail, you know, day one, I'll sort this out, and if I was president, this never would have started. Well, we're now 13 months into his presidency, and we don't seem, I'm an optimist, and I don't see, I've been wrong so many times, I don't see anything happening anytime soon.
And when I had a look today at some of the figures that came out, because, you know, at the heart of all of this, when we look at war, we can talk about drone technology and warfare and how much that's come about. We can talk about the resilience of Ukraine and how Russia's still funded their war-footing economy, both extremely resilient countries. But it's the casualties that are extremely, extremely distressing. We look at estimates by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. 1.2 million Russians have lost their lives. Casualties are between 500,000 and 600,000 in Ukraine. So more casualties on the Russian side if these figures are to be believed. So today, 4 years on, it must be a huge day of reflection for those people in Ukraine and Russia. They've both lost people.
I'm remembering as well all the big armies that North Korea was promising. You know, we've seen so many different stages of this war. When Putin held his big military show in Moscow, and he had world leaders there, and we were saying, wow, Russia is not as isolated as we thought. But now it seems they are isolated again. We've seen so many different layers to this war and things going back and forth. Now, as you say, we're at a stalemate again. It just seems to kind of ping pong all the time, and the rules seem to change all the time and the boundaries change all the time.
I also think that there might be, I don't want to sound optimistic, but the Russian economy does seem to be creaking a little bit. We had the French foreign minister who said that the Russians are losing about 1,000 soldiers a day, but he also talked about the economy in Russia may be entering a recession, and that the national treasury is empty, that there's gasoline rationing, and that they're also now having to, some parts of the population, blocking phone service. And I think when the big cities start to feel the effects of war, finally, I think that's something that will maybe motivate Vladimir Putin to come to the negotiating table.
But as we did say, because Ukraine and their drone technology, they're now targeting those gas facilities inside of Russia. It's really hurting the economy. And there's a whole lot happening now. Extra sanctions on Russia when it comes to shadow shipping oil to India, to China, to various different places. But, you know, we reflect on 4 years, and it's a moment really where I also think those who lost their lives, you know, their families will be thinking of them in both Russia and Ukraine. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Stay right there now as we move on to another story. And President Trump's global tariffs have come into effect, but at a much lower rate of 10%. Trump previously said the rate would be 15% after the Supreme Court's decision to block many of his sweeping import taxes. The rate cut comes ahead of the President's State of the Union address that will take place in Washington a little bit later on today. So, Michael, we are waiting for the State of the Union address by President Donald Trump. A lot of people are wondering how long it's going to be. The last one was 90 minutes, so we'll have to wait to see.
I'm sure there are people laying wagers on how long.
Absolutely. I think people who are also going to watch it are probably thinking about that. So tariffs, a massive blow to Donald Trump on Friday after that Supreme Court ruling. You know, lots of his economic policy hinged on tariffs. So how have trade partners and businesses reacted to this ruling in the States? So
the EU is the only one that I've seen that's come out, and they've talked about it, and they said that they're not going to ratify it. And I don't know if Donald Trump has responded to that particular EU comment, but he has said that countries that are going to play games will suffer the consequences. Again, not sure what that means.
And EU is an ally of America, which is something I also didn't want to forget today when I was looking at the story, because, you know, they are traditional friends. Yeah.
But where I come from, we're traditionally an ally of the United States as well, and that doesn't mean much right now, because Donald Trump is a fan. He's talked about tariffs being his favorite word, right? One of his top 3 favorite words. He's spoken of his love and affection for tariffs since the 80s. It's something that he holds near and dear. And I don't think that he necessarily sees the aggressiveness in his language when he speaks to traditional allies because he's talking about only the good business side of business with tariffs, or at least what he thinks will be generated as a result. Now, has the economy drawn in an awful lot of money? By estimates, it's about $150 billion. But that's just a tax on the American voter. And the American voter, as we're talking about with the State of the Union, the American voter is feeling like their concerns are not heard by a president who doesn't necessarily see that he campaigned on lowering prices, and yet prices have gone up.
And China has also threatened retaliation over Trump's tariffs. What have come in, this blanket 10%. I think a lot of people are holding out to see what the laws are around these tariffs and what industries that they will affect, because right now it will change those deals that were previously made with the likes of the UK. So we see the EU stepping back and saying, actually, we're not going to sign this deal in Brussels or do a vote on it until we know exactly what we're looking at. And China saying the same thing. And of course, Donald Trump heading to China at the end of next month. So there's a lot happening when it comes to these tariffs. And of course, you know, postal companies like FedEx have filed a lawsuit, and that was yesterday, against Donald Trump's tariffs, because they would have really affected their company when it comes to imports and exports. There's a lot to look at. And of course, State of the Union address is coming up in the next few hours. And the main concern of the American people is the economy. It's how much they're paying at the tills. And that seems to be something that Donald Trump really needs to address.
I think irrespective of what he addresses, the average American knows what they've got in their wallet at the end of each week, you know,
Absolutely.
Whether they've paid out for groceries, whether they're paying out for, you know, petrol and all that kind of thing. So irrespective of whatever facts are presented during the State of the Union, that goes against, we were saying earlier, how people feel about it and, you know, the money they're left with at the end of the week.
And what I find absolutely fascinating is, what do you think we can expect from the State of the Union address tonight? Because, Gemma, you know, we follow US politics closely here. It's not united, the United States of America at the moment.
No.
To put it into that context. What does Donald Trump need to do to galvanise support for himself? Because the midterms are not that far off either.
Well, we're wondering, there are points he's definitely going to stick to, and then you're wondering how far off track he's going to go, because he does meander in his rhetoric. It's the 250th year of US, so, you know, the sources, White House sources have said that the theme is going to be America at 250, strong, prosperous and respected. So he's going to argue about this new age of, you know, American prosperity. That will be a key theme he'll return to. Economy is going to be a top priority. Now, the job market in the US has slowed. They have had the smallest job growth outside of a recession since 2003. And also, he'll bring in the tax cuts. We all remember the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which seems such a long time, but it was only last year. Now, health and prescription drugs is going to be a big thing as well, because if we remember last September, Trump got together with the 16 big drug companies in the US, and they all said they were going to lower their prices. Now, in January, so last month, all 16 of them raised the prices of 872 brand name drugs. And that includes treatments for cancer, heart failure, and type 2 diabetes. I don't know how he's going to spin that. You know, we'll have to wait and see. Now, a huge part of the speech has got to be dedicated to immigration. You know, the ICE agents and border security and his deployment of the National Guard. These are going to be shown as a show of strength. This is what I've done to tackle immigration. Very much this America first rhetoric that he returns to again and again. And then we will have a focus on foreign policy, largely as it pertains to his involvement in Gaza and Ukraine, Russia, and also with what's going on in Iran.
Yeah, it's been absolutely fascinating, because lots of analysts have been speaking about the State of the Union speech, and they did say, two White House officials speaking on condition of anonymity have been speaking to Reuters, and they said that Trump might take this as a chance to sort of sell military intervention in Iran to the country. So that's something that people are looking for really closely in the speech this evening, as we do see that huge military build-up in Iran.
Yeah, I think if you were to just look in the 13 months that Donald Trump's been back in the White House.
He has been back in the office, yeah.
Yes, he has. But when you look at what was happening off the coast of Venezuela, they didn't just amass all of those ships as a show of force.
Exactly.
There was a reason behind it,
Yeah.
as it turns out. And I also don't think that you have two massive aircraft carriers, the Abraham Lincoln and the Gerald R. Ford, which is on its way, in the region. If you're not, that's an awful lot of show of force. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you have the 9th Fleet not too far from here. You have an Air Force base not too far from here. You have other military bases here in the region as well. So you wouldn't necessarily need to do that. But if you're just going to park those off the coast of Iran, I think that there's a reason that you're doing that. Mm-hmm. But I want to get back just for a moment to your points when you started about unifying the country. If Donald Trump veers off course, off script a little bit too much, he might not even be part of a unified Republican Party, because you have so many people
Absolutely.
who are going to be running for re-election in the midterms. Donald Trump isn't, mm-hmm. but he's going to want to make sure that he's not a lame duck president for the last 2 years of his time in office, and he's going to need to be speaking certain lines that the congressmen and the senators who are running for re-election can take on the campaign trail, and they can sell to their constituents so that they get reelected.
I was speaking to a Republican a little bit earlier in my first show, and I did ask her, Amy Tarkanian, I did say to her, have you lost faith in Donald Trump? And she said, at the moment, that's the way it's feeling. We need Donald Trump to come out and unify the country and the party and not lose focus on what the main agenda in the country is. Yeah. And she said that's the problem. He tends to yo-yo and things get confusing, and that's what's frustrating them at the moment. But let's see what comes out of this State of the Union address tonight. So thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on. Mexico has deployed thousands of soldiers to tighten security and tame the violence that has spread since the death of powerful drug lord Al Mencho. Dozens of people have died, including at least 25 members of Mexico's National Guard and 30 members from the criminal organization. So, Michael, it's kind of the day after the day before. What's the latest out of the unrest that just sprawled across Mexico?
So most of the streets of major cities are empty. Mm-hmm. Travel warnings by at least US, Canada, Australia, and the UK. Shelter in place for civilians who are in the city, tourists as well. Schools are closed, businesses are closed. Claudia Sheinbaum has said that peace and security is returning. But at least one journalist who was on the ground reporting from one city said that there is a lot of fear and hesitation. So I don't know that the country is yet over this. And because they've had such a long history of some of these battles, they may fear that this is the beginning of that next phase that could be incredibly violent.
I was speaking to a journalist from Mexico City earlier, and I asked him that very question. He'd say, Al Mencho's left. Mm-hmm. There's a massive power vacuum at the top now of this cartel. The cartel has its own paramilitary organization, a huge criminal network. How dangerous is that fight for who gets the next top job? And he says that is the concern in Mexico, because that could be where the violence really comes into play as people fight for that position.
And drags out for much longer, yeah.
And it could also separate the cartel into different factions, and then things become even more complicated across Mexico itself. But Gemma, I know something about you. You are a big football fan.
I am.
You're going to the World Cup.
Yes.
We can't forget the World Cup is coming up extremely soon in Mexico. How is this going to affect the World Cup? I don't know if you have tickets to go to Mexico, but if you did, would you be going, basically?
So, I'm taking my family to the World Cup. We don't have tickets for any games in Mexico, but I can unequivocally state that if we did, I would be selling them. I would not be taking my young children to Mexico with only 4 months, in 4 months' time, knowing that anything could happen, really, irrespective of whether the government says everything's under control. We said before the show, it only takes one person to act, alone, and we have seen tourists in Mexico perhaps enter the wrong area and they end up dead. So absolutely not. I would not be going. There are a lot of concerns. It's 4 months away. It's coming around so fast. Obviously, security concerns. The scrutiny on Mexico now is absolutely incredible. And they've already postponed so many sporting events and rescheduled their own domestic sporting events that talk has naturally turned to where can we move these games to if we need to. Obviously, they would move to the US and to Canada. So FIFA must be scrambling to decide, right, which stadiums are we going to use if we need to. Obviously, travel advisories, governments have put warnings in place, event scheduling, but above all, it's public perception. As I have just attested, this evening, my perception is that this is too dangerous a place to take my family, and if I did have tickets to those games, I wouldn't be going.
And I think that's a very fair point, especially public perception and what we've been seeing playing out on our television screens. But thank you for your thoughts on that. Stay right there. Let's move on. US news anchor Savannah Guthrie is now offering a $1 million reward for information leading to the return of her missing mother. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was abducted from her home 24 days ago. Her daughter said the family still believed in a miracle and hoped she can come home.
Coming on to say it is day 24.
Gemma, we had a clip of Savannah Guthrie there. It was just a quick one. We're meant to have the whole clip, but apologies for that if you're watching at home. Clearly distressed, Savannah Guthrie. Absolutely distressed.
Yeah, you can see the toll it's taken.
Oh, gosh. My heart, when I watched it, I felt like this is a hard watch, 24 days since Nancy's disappearance. I mean, where are we? What do we know about the search? It seems to be that there was a lot of resources sent and still not much info, really.
Well, this was a 4-minute video, and in it, for the first time, they acknowledged the fact that Nancy might not be alive. So they have offered a $1 million reward. Now, they've said that if she's not alive, they want to know where she is. They're going to want to bring her home to them. Now, there's been a lot of focus on this mixed DNA, which forensics have found at the property. They need to separate the DNA from family and from Nancy, but they're saying there is some sort of foreign DNA there, but it could take months to figure this out. So that's probably one of the biggest developments with regards to this. Again, with the dramatically increased reward. Now, I found this very interesting. So detectives have received over 40,000 tips. And as we were saying before the show, as a reward increases, you're going to get more and more people involved. Now, what they've also said, though, they've warned civilians against getting too involved in search efforts. Now, we live in the age of the crime podcast, the Netflix crime show. We have seen shows where online investigators all band together and they manage to solve crimes. Obviously, we only hear about the successes. And I'm wondering if the police are wondering how they can utilise this kind of galvanised online community who have nothing but time and resources without muddying the crime scene, so to speak. How do you tap into that as a resource?
It's so interesting because volunteers went out searching over the weekend for Nancy Guthrie. According to reports, they found a backpack. They handed that into the sheriff's department and to the police. The backpack was actually no link at all to the case. It wasn't a lead. And they said, don't go out doing your own searches. Leave it to authorities because it's wasting valuable time. So I guess that would be their argument in it. But what I find absolutely fascinating is right now, that's where we are, but there's no additional video camera footage, Michael. There's no vehicle of interest, and investors are still searching the neighbourhood. I don't want to read in between the lines here, but something just seems a little bit suspect to me.
So there's a lot of information, I think, that a lot of people will be questioning. And you talked about no more doorbell footage, but is there? And that's one of the issues that has been raised today. So a couple of weeks ago, FBI Director Kash Patel released the footage of this gentleman in the mask, this person in the mask at the doorbell with a backpack and a gun holster in the front of his waistband. Then today, there were more photographs, again, doorbell footage, but there was no backpack that was being worn and no holster. So people started to wonder, is this a different time? Is this before, like, when was this taken? Yeah. And so now there are a couple of anonymous sources within the police who are saying that we don't know the timeline, but we think that maybe this is not from the same night. Also, amateur sleuths have looked, and the background, the night seems a little bit either darker or lighter. It doesn't seem exactly the same. And what they have done, based on the reports that NBC has produced, is gone around the authorities to neighbors asking for all of their footage to see if maybe this guy in the mask had been out in the neighborhood in the days or weeks leading up to Nancy's kidnapping.
And the investigators are now open to the idea that the suspect possibly had an accomplice. So we're hearing more and more things come out of this investigation. But I know that we're talking about this at the moment, but I also think right now we're in 2026. All of us wear technology. It's the age of people always out with camera phones. Most of our properties have Ring doorbells. How can someone just go missing and there be no kind of evidence at the moment? I just find it fascinating.
Yeah, especially, you're right, like Ring doorbells, we can walk past anyone's home and suddenly we're caught on camera, and people have home security as well. This really makes me think that this was planned quite heavily.
An inside job, possibly.
Could be an inside job, because they just kind of knew. I think they disconnected as well, the Ring doorbell
the
as
Nest
well.
camera.
Yes,
They disconnected it and destroyed it.
So you've got to have had someone walking past every day, taking a look, taking a casual glance, making note of the security that's here, there, and everywhere. But I do agree with you. How does someone go missing in 2026? But if we don't have our technology with us, if we don't have our watches, if we don't have our phones, and we discussed in another show that they can't trace her pacemaker, then, people can still go missing.
And even more strange, no motive.
So it would seem. And then maybe, so she's 84, she's on medication, she doesn't leave the home, then you abduct her, and 36 hours later, something awful happens. You're no longer in a position where you can demand anything because you can't return what it is that you took. And I wonder if perhaps something like that happened, and it may also be one reason why the abductors are in a position where they recognize that it's best to sort of just walk away from this because there's nothing that can be done. And as you said earlier, there's just too much attention on this case now as well. If they're getting 40,000 calls, major networks are covering it on a regular basis. It's not something that is just going to slide under the radar, and that you're going to be able to go and send the police on a wild goose chase so that you can pick up your ill-gotten gains.
One thing that I found quite interesting is a final thought on this. As this case has gained momentum, conspiracy theories start online when it comes to people who are doing true crime.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of footage of Savannah Guthrie interviewing Virginia Giuffre, who's linked to Jeffrey Epstein, has come up time and time again on the internet. And there's been lots of links to conspiracy theorists, with Savannah Guthrie being the first person to interview Virginia Giuffre in the links with the Epstein investigation. So, there's a lot going online about
these days
this whole
as well,
story.
Nothing's beyond the realms of possibility,
No.
is it? As we've seen from the Epstein files. Who knew that all these people were so connected around the globe? So, yeah, it's not beyond the realms at all.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on that, and I do hope that the family gets some news at some point about Nancy Guthrie. And it's that time of the show where Gemma and Michael have chosen two of their quirkiest stories of the day. Gemma, we're going to start with yours because it's all about this Pokemon card that sold for $16 million US.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you even want to buy that?
Right, I've got 3 sons, so I have hundreds of Pokemon cards at home, but none of them are worth $16 million.
So don't break into Gemma's house.
How do you know?
Because they watch all these videos, you know, oh, I've done this pearl, and then they discard them. Yeah, so unfortunately, devastating. So Logan Paul is the YouTuber turned boxer.
Yes.
And he has set the new world record for the auction price of this trading card. So it's called a Pikachu Illustrator Pokemon. Now, he bought it in 2021 for $5.2 million.
And everyone thought he was mental.
Yes,
when he
what
did
are you
that.
doing paying all this? And that was just, 5 years ago. Now it's sold for $16.5 million, setting records. It was 41 days of bidding as well. Now, it actually went to, do you remember White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci?
The mooch. I love the mooch.
It went to his son, AJ Scaramucci, who's a venture capitalist. Now, to sweeten the deal, Logan Paul threw in a diamond necklace. You know, I don't know how we don't know which portion of this $60 million the diamond necklace was worth. But the reason it's so expensive is it was designed by, I need to get this right, Atsuko Nishida. Now, she was the creator of Pikachu. She's a very, very, very famous Japanese graphic artist, and she's the one who designed it. They believe there's only about a dozen of these in existence, and his is absolutely perfect quality.
It's crazy, right? Because Logan Paul, obviously the brother of Jake Paul, who fought AJ. So I just feel like, why are the Pauls making all this money? It's just not fair, is it? But also, I quite like the fact that Pokemon cards are coming back in fashion, or have they always been in fashion? I mean, I don't know much.
They did fall out of fashion for a long time. Yeah, it was. And then I think with Pokemon Go, do you remember that kind of united the world a few years ago when everyone was, running into Central Park with their phones to gotta catch them all?
Oh, yes.
That kind of reignited the Pokemon cards. But to the people who love it, it's never gone away. It's always been a huge part of their lives. But the world has caught on a bit more. And as with so many of these lovely little trends, so much money starts to become involved, which I guess for the purists, that's kind of spoiled it. But no, it's more popular than ever.
I must admit, I don't know anything. I've never even watched Pokemon, but I hear it's very worth the watch, so let's see. And I love your story, actually, Michael, because it's all about bird watching and basically why bird watching is pretty good for your brain.
So that's what so there's a study, Canadian study, only of 58 adults, but what they've recognized is that if you are an experienced bird watcher, your cognition is probably better than someone who is not a bird watcher. And apparently what happens is that the density of your tissue in your brain actually increases the communication between neurons. And you will have more dense tissue if, in fact, you are able to do what you need to do when you're bird watching, which is see a bird and then connect that with the mental images that you've already stored in your brain to make sure, oh, it has this coloring and it has this plumage, and therefore it must be this type of bird. That ability to recall memory and that ability to connect the dots is apparently, they don't know if it necessarily will stop cognition decline, but they do believe that it will help improve your mental health.
And Gemma and Michael, we're just seeing pictures on the screen there of bird watching, and we talk about cognitive health, but I also wonder if it's connected to bird watching as outdoors. Yeah. You have to get out into the fresh air, you see there's a group of people doing it, so you've got people to connect with and discuss things with. I wonder if the factors around bird watching help too.
And you have to be passionate. This isn't something you do on a whim. It's a passion. Yeah. You go out, you get all the equipment, and you go out and you meet these like-minded people as well. So, yeah, and isn't it like socialising as you get older as well? It's so important, isn't it, for your mental health? So, and I was going to say it brings a whole new meaning to the term bird brain, so...
Oh, that's so true. I never thought of that. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But I always loved those people when I used to get the train in London, people who stand at the corner of the platform and do all the train
Yeah.
spotting, you know, that has to be a real passion.
Really, yeah, because
Yeah.
you're standing out in all weathers. And
All
you're-
weathers,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
And I think having that passion is important because it's essentially having a purpose. And I think having that purpose is what
Yeah.
helps people.
And that community.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much to our guests today, columnist and correspondent Gemma White and Michael Jabri-Pickett, Managing Director of This Is Dubai. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X, G&T. Coming up next, goodbye and thank you.